world and I would.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I am.
How are you? That's a huge question right now.
I was just about to say that's a fucked question right now. It's like, where do I start? Oh,
Yeah.
this year's been like so massive, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually would say checking in, I've been feeling a little bit frustrated and almost powerless, actually, even though I have a practice, right? That just everything that seems to be occurring outside of me that we never have control of anyway is a bit fuckery. And it feels like there are a lot of humans making choices on the planet at the moment that don't make sense. Oh, I've lost you again.
Yes, absolutely. Can I, 1 second, 1 second. Am I still there? Hang on.
Yeah.
We're back. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So let's talk about that. How, when this all started, were you in like, oh, because when I started, I was in team virus. I was like, yeah, let's lock down. It's all very serious. No one moves. I agree with the science. Were you the same?
I joined the Communist Party.
Yeah. But I thought, I don't know why I thought this, that, it might be real. They're telling the truth. And we should all panic, we should all do the right thing. Actually, we should be precautious, and just in case it is something, like Ebola that wipes everybody out. But as things evolved, and the more information that comes out, the more lies we see, the more treachery, the more manipulation. It just seems to be like, whatever it is, they're just using it for their own agenda. That's what it seems to me.
But I think that in government and in politics, there since as far back as I can remember, or anything that I've ever studied, there's always agendas.
Yes.
Like, we're only privy to so much information. And to be honest, I think I fully went into fear when this all happened. And fear is such it's like a weapon of mine, because I've learned a lot about it, given the fact that I have a kidney disease. So that is actually, kidneys energetically is fear. And I think growing up with the childhood that I've had, fear is something that is so familiar to me that when there's stuff playing out that triggers it, it's easy for me to go to that place of feeling like the ground's been taken out from underneath me and buying into it. And in essence, I too want to be safe. And it's not that I don't believe there's a virus. Like, I absolutely know that there is. I've actually got very close people that have lost family to it. So it's raw in that aspect for people that have experienced that. But it just, like I said, 8.5 million people this year have died of starvation. But there's no fucking rules, and we're not feeding them, we're not sending shiploads of food, which is the vaccine. So it just feels like there's so much more happening. And the fact that we went from, I've always felt like a privileged person growing up in Western society, and now I'm like, oh, and it's not like I don't know what it's like. I've been to war, I've been to Iraq, I understand what it's like to be around, to live in an environment where privilege is not the same as the Western world. So and now I'm starting to go, oh, it's evening out all around the world. None of us have many choices anymore. And people are like selling their shit and moving out of Victoria, going, where in Australia are there spaces that are not buying into this kind of panic? Because our government, our PM in Victoria, let's talk about the belts and roads and China, and
that's huge. And to even suggest that Daniel Andrews isn't compromised seems crazy, you know, like.
Wouldn't anybody in politics be compromised? Because to get what you've got, you have to sell something.
Yeah, but you know, like to China, so obviously, you know, and it's not hidden. They did the deal. It was very, very obvious.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, obviously they're all intertwined with each other. They all have their little scams going on. But usually they don't affect us this much, right? Usually, you know, they do a business deal. They take kickbacks later on. You know, it's about money. This is about control. This is about taking human rights away. So this is really scary stuff. You know, and I don't want to say that in fear either, but it's scary in the sense that we need to be urgently or like paying attention to it, not just turning back to it, you know?
Well, inquiring and being curious and asking why, and then looking at what your options actually are. Mm-hmm. And if they don't feel right, then making sure you take steps.
Yeah.
You create a pathway so you have the options that you need. Like, you know, if I didn't have my family here and I didn't share 2 dogs with my 2 friends down in Janjat, I was like, would I just leave and move right now? Mm-hmm. Like, and I have a business, so I've been super affected. 6 months pretty much of not working at the capacity that I always have.
Yeah.
So, and that's not, you know, I'm a yoga teacher on the side. Like, that's one thing that I do. I mean, I'm a yogi. That's my lifestyle. But like, I own a hairdressing salon as well, you know, and I also founded an organization that takes yoga to the prisons. So I just feel like every thing that I've created, I'm just in this stop. Mm-hmm. But in the same token, I'm using this time most of the time as effectively as I can, and then there's a few times where I just fucking slid down the rabbit hole and went, what's on Netflix?
Yeah.
Give me something that's got nothing to do with what's going on here right now, so I can just avoid.
100%. So let's go back to you first and talk about, you know, I always ask on this podcast, how did you become spiritual? And it's a bit of a facetious question because, you know, we're all spiritual, you know, even if we don't know it. But how was that? How was spirituality?
Well, I can't.
This
Something's
kind of stuff
happening. Your vocal keeps going in and out. By the way, can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly.
Yeah. So it's amazing because I did a story that provoked in me. I actually responded to you when you asked me. I said, fuck, I was born that way. And then I thought, oh my God, he probably is going to think I'm really arrogant saying that. Do you think he thinks? And then I thought, when I felt into that, I was like, but I really was. And I think, you know, I'm part Māori, you know, so it's in my blood. And I would have to say, from a really young age, I felt things and saw things that maybe other people didn't feel or see, and energy's always been something that I understood. So it wasn't really taught to me, it was more uncovered as I grew up. But I remember, I mean, I was mucking around with seances and spirits like young. Yeah, everybody does, but like really, really young, feeling into that kind of space. And I grew up, to give a bit of background, my mum was my father was full-blooded Māori, and my mum she was white, but she had like a quarter in her, but, you know, most people would never have seen. And my grandmother, who spoke Māori, but she just denied that part of her, so she sort of pretended it didn't exist. So I grew up around really predominantly a white family. Mm-hmm. My brothers and sisters were all white. And I think because I was isolated from them and there was a lot of, I would say, casual racism, that no one really understood what that truly was and how that impacted a child in the family, that I sought out my culture from a really young age. So I was, you know, going to the marae, which is where you learn about storytelling and the spirits and gods. So that was in me from a really young age. But the first experience I ever remember that was an awakening, I think I was like 12 or 13. and I was asleep, and I sort of felt somebody tapping me on the shoulder, and I woke up, and it was my nana. Mm. But the thing is, my nana didn't live anywhere near me. She lived 10 hours away, like a 3-hour plane ride, and like a 10 hours away. She was on the other island, so she was in the North Island. So she tapped me, and she said, and actually she had in the vision, she had a muka on her face, which is the Māori carving that the woman carved their face when they're ready to be married. Mm-hmm. And it represents the tribe they're from, and then you would know if you could marry them or not, because there was different tribes that could marry different tribes. Mm-hmm. So my nana had a muka, which was weird because she didn't have one in her actual life. And she had a hand on me, and she said to me, I've gone, but I'll watch over you. Mm. And I was just sitting there, and I said, oh, thank you, Nana. And I smiled at her, and she held my hand, and then she just disappeared. And then I just sat there in the dark, and I thought, I wonder if I should tell Mum Nana's passed. Yeah. And then the phone went. And my mum went to the phone, and it was in the middle of the night. And I heard her voice, and then I heard her hang up the phone and start crying. And she walked into my room, and she turned on the light, and I said, turn the fucking light off. Like I did. We had a pretty fractious relationship, and my nana had raised me a lot of my life, so I was very close to her. And obviously I would have been slipping into some sense of grief, but I didn't actually know what that felt like at 12. But it was anger actually towards my mum. And she said, I need to tell you something. And I said, I already know. And she said, what do you know? And I said, Nana died. And she said, how do you know? I said, oh, she just visited me. Wow. She sat on my bed, and she held my hand, and she told me that she would look over me. And Mum burst into tears and said, she didn't visit me. And I said, she didn't need to. Like, you know, and so that was my first experience, I guess, of recognizing that there was energy that was greater than just what's in this physical world, whether you call it spirituality or not. Mm-hmm. And I think she came to me because I always listened, and she knew that I had that in me. I was very curious. And I also had grown up going to Kapahaka Club, which is the Māori dancing and the poise and the whole kind of experience. And that was something that I believe in our culture. It's not that you become spiritual. It's just that's your right. That's every soul's right that arrives on the earth plane. And your job, I guess, in the human body is to always seek out what's in the way of that, and also know that we're already that, you know. Yeah. So I guess I spent a lot of my years sifting through a lot of the trauma that I experienced as a child, but that became my fierce drive to always stay connected to something that taught me that these experiences are happening for us, not to us. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And so what about, how did you get into like yoga and stuff like that then? Is it something that you moved into like, you know, like out of school? Tell us about that after school kind of thing.
Yeah. So I left New Zealand at 20 and went to America. So I was a little skateboarder chick. Yeah. And I got like I saved and got the first skateboard at my school. So I was the girl in a skateboard, and I wore boys' clothes, you know, and I had my Farrah Fawcett flex with the tongue every day. Like I was totally into fashion from a really young age. My mum was an amazing dressmaker. So I left and went to California because that's where the skaters and all the cool kids were. Mm-hmm. And I arrived in Venice Beach. And it just so happened my housemates were all Dogtown skaters, and the people that would come to my house every day were like Christian Assoy, Eric Dressen, like you name it, the Dogtown skaters, everybody. So that's that was my journey from, I landed in Venice Beach and was living with this culture. And if anybody's ever seen Dogtown Skates, I was living in that. But it was second generation, because obviously Jay Adams, he was at my house every day. Because my housemate was selling pot, so of course everybody came, and that was my entry from New Zealand into America and sort of my young adulthood. So I spent a lot of years kind of finding myself there and in the music world. And what was the question again? I just got sidetracked.
I just wanted to know what you did like after school. So you said
I landed in America.
Yeah, and then the music world. What about that? How'd you get into that?
Well, music came a little bit later. Music came when I moved back to Australia and I met Michael Franti, whom I met when I was like 27, I think. But I was really into music in California. And in fact, I dated one of my first growing up boyfriends was the drummer from Blondie, who is Blondie, Clem Burke. And so I was sort of always around music, even in New Zealand. You know, I sorted out Eurythmics. I actually met Clem when he was touring with Eurythmics in New Zealand, and we just became friends. He was a perfect gentleman, and at that time he was married and he just wanted to hang out with people. But then I ran into him like 4 years later in LA, and he was no longer married, and we hung out. So I was always around music. And in fact, he took me to my first like white linen tablecloth restaurant, and it was like a scene from fucking Pretty Woman when I'm a skater chick. I'm living in Venice Beach. I go to like garage parties and hardcore, it was quite extraordinary. Henry Rollins lived 3 doors from me. It was like this really incredible cultural epicenter of stuff that now everybody looks back on in its history. And I was like, oh, fuck, I was in that. That was a part of my life. Mm. But he took me, and I remember sitting there and I was like, fuck, why are there so many knives and forks? What do I do with this? And I said, why is there so many knives and forks? And he laughed and said, just start from the outside and work your way in. And I was like, okay. And then when I had to order, I just looked at him, and he was Italian. So he took me to an Italian restaurant. And he said, what kind of wine would you like? And I turned and looked at him and I whispered, I've only ever had it out of the goon. Like, out of the box. And actually, we ended up becoming really great friends, and I helped him through a lot of healing because he was going through a divorce, and we stayed friends, and I saw him many years ago. So he was like a huge introduction into music scene in Hollywood and that kind of world. Mm-hmm. And always a really beautiful kind of beacon for me, because when I met him in New Zealand, we hung out a lot, and I was pretty wild. I think he met me because he was trying to find marijuana, and I was like, oh, I sell it. So, that's how we became friends. But he sat with me, he took me to lunch, and he sat with me and he said, promise me you'll leave this town. It's too small for you. And he saw something in me that I hadn't even seen in myself, because here was this extraordinary world-class musician, and he wasn't trying to get with me. We were just hanging out and having this amazing friendship. Mm-hmm. He did not touch me. And he said to me, and I'll never forget, he said, you're so fucking extraordinary. I can't wait to meet you when you become a woman. Mm. I was like, I'm a woman. And he was like, no, I want to meet you when you're growing up. And 4 years later, I was at Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds in downtown LA with my housemates. And I was in this room and I was like, this is fucking really heavy. And I didn't know anything about that scene of what goes on in that scene as far as what people were taking, but it smelt weird. And that's my soul that says, get out. And I looked at the housemates and everybody was like off their head. And I thought, okay, I smoke a bit of pot, but there's something else going on here. I need to leave. And I walked out, and actually If anybody knows that, if you've got any idea of English music, The and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And I was really into, at that time, a lot of alternative English music because I lived with a bunch of English people. And I went out and I sat on the stairs and this man came up and he said, Tina George. And I was sitting there in PVC and like eye makeup and hair. I definitely changed from the little girl in New Zealand. And I looked at him and I go, yeah. And he goes, you don't remember me? And I said, no. Because at that point, I was dating a guy that was like in a hardcore thrasher band and he worked for Suicidal Tendencies and he was a skateboarder. So I was into this whole kind of beach skater scene and I was like, nah, and here's this dude in black leather and Ray-Bans and like, and I said, no, I don't remember you. And he said, it's Clem. And I went, fuck. And that was that's how we sort of reconnected. And he said, I knew you'd grow up. And I said, well, you just got older. I mean, he was a lot older than me when I met him. But yeah, that was my introduction into music and that whole scene. And my boss that I worked for skated. He was a pro skater for Pepsi in the 80s. And he grew up with Tony Alva. So, you know, and he was a hairdresser and wild. Like in LA, you're either on drugs, in NA, or on your way to doing one or the other.
Yeah, right.
And he was in the program and he came up with the Chili Peppers. Like I was around all those people, but he was like extraordinary. He cut Grace Jones' hair for the album cover of Slave to the Rhythm. So he was really creative and a skater. So that was an amazing place to kind of be in. And certainly my spirituality, or living in that energy, that it was a different kind of spirituality. I saw things and I experienced things, but not the way that I choose to live now.
Yeah, right. And so...
Oh, you froze. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello? I can still hear you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
What did you do in the music industry? What was your job?
So I ended up working for Michael Franti, and that happened when I was here in Australia. I went on the road with him and I toured right throughout the whole entire world, actually. And I ran his publicity on the road. I worked for Guerrilla Management, a company in San Francisco who managed Michael. And Michael was the one that wanted me to come out on the road with him, but I signed up with his management so that pretty much this is where I got into yoga. He was a yogi and I was doing Bikram at the time. And Michael and I had known each other for quite a few years. And he was like, oh, Bikram sucks. And I was like, listen, everybody's got their pathway in. And all yoga is fucking yoga, man. Like, if you want to sit and meditate on a rock all day, that's your yoga. If you want to walk mindfully through each day and know if that could be somebody else's yoga, I said, there's no one fucking religion. You know, you tell the Catholics that the Protestants are right. And it's just like, you tell the Muslims and the Jews, there's no one way to God. And so he said, wait till I take your first vinyasa class. And I was like, all right, whatever. And so on the road, one of my jobs was to book yoga in every stop.
Yeah,
so
right.
Every day. So we practiced yoga every day, but not only book yoga, his teachers were like Shiva Ray and Sharon Gannon and David Life that started Jiva Mukti and Janet Stone and, you know, like pretty much the world's best yoga teachers. And I would have access to all of them and just sort of ring up and go, oh, hi, Janet, we're going to be in town for 2 days. Oh, yeah, fine. I'll come and give you guys privates. So that was music, my career in music with Michael and yoga all started together. And once I started practicing with that caliber of teachers, I would travel to the States and work for a month and tour for a month. And then I would come back to Australia for 3 weeks and then I would go back on the road. And that's what my life was like for a few years and how I ended up going to Iraq with Michael and making a film in the middle of the war and the Gaza Strip. So yeah, so that all came together at the same time, and that was my yoga journey. Really, it was the beginning of.
Right.
And I would come back to Australia and go, "Fuck, yoga's shit here." So it really, because we didn't have at that point. There was no vinyasa studio in Melbourne, nothing. There was an Ashtanga studio, and you would have had your traditional hatha, but I was traveling around the world doing vinyasa with these extraordinary teachers. And then I now realize, you know, I could have found amazing yoga, but I was sort of stuck on, I wanted it the way that I was actually learning it in America at that time. And then it slowly came. Mm-hmm. So really that was like 20 years ago and I'd already been doing yoga out of a book. In fact, I still have that yoga book called Richard Hiddleman's 28 Days to Evolution. And I had that book for years in LA, actually, while I lived, even in the skateboarding house, I did it. And I remember thinking, I'm fucking never evolved, man. Every time I get to the end of this book, I've got so far to go. Am I ever going to?
And so,
I still feel like that every time I get on that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even the asana anymore for me, you know. It's actually, that's just a small limb of it. For me, that's all it was for many years. And now it's like I read, that can be my yoga. I listen. My storytelling feels like yoga for me because I go through so many cathartic experiences sharing what I've gone through in my life and knowing that it helps connect people to their own path is such a beautiful gift. So I feel pretty lucky that I now realize that mat over there is just not even 1% of what this practice truly is.
Mm-hmm. And so what about Iraq? Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't even know what the fuck I was thinking. So I don't watch television or read a newspaper. And at this point, I was touring with Michael. He rings me up. Oh, no, he was at the Blues Festival up in Byron, and I was flying up to tour with him. And he goes, I've got something to tell you. I need to meet you at lunch. And there was another woman with me, Sinem Saban, who's Turkish. She's from Australia, and she's a filmmaker. And he invited her too. And he sat us down and he looked, and Kat, his manager, whom I worked for many years, who's become a great friend and mentor, he said, so Tina, I've been singing about war for so long. You know, he wrote a song, you can bomb the world to pieces, you can't bomb it into peace. And he's a social activist and a really extraordinary human being. And he said, I'm going to go to Iraq. And I looked at him, and he then looked at Sinem and he said, would you like to come and be a film, shoot it, be the videographer? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, what can I do for you in Australia? He said, well, you could raise money. And I was like, I can do that. And so I got on the blower and I rang up John Butler, because they're family friends of mine. And I got on to, oh my God, his name's just out of my head, Xavier Raj. Yeah, and the beautiful girls. And I rang them all and I said, would you do a benefit and help me raise some money? And they said, you know what, we'll give you, John was like, fuck, I'm so busy, I'll just give you a check for this much money. And he donated I think it was $5,000. And at that point, I had saved enough money to buy a house comfortably. And I was looking at a house down the peninsula for $216,000 in Rye. And I had all this money sitting in the bank, and I managed to raise, I can't remember, I think about 10 grand. And I sent it over to Michael. And obviously, because I was a part of the fundraising, I was also a part of every email that was going out about it and who was going. And they had lawyers that were working with Woody Harrelson that were trying to find loopholes in the constitutional rights that sent children to war, because you can't drink until you're 21, but you can hold an M16 and kill somebody. And so Thomas, and I can't remember his name actually. Thomas was Italian, because it's a long time ago. This is like starting to go back. But I was reading all these people going, and literally a week and a half before they went, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, what the fuck? Why am I not going? Why am I not going? I should be going.
Mm-hmm.
And bear in mind, I don't know what's happening there. On the TV every night in Australia, they're talking about terrorism. They're showing militants putting bags over people's heads that are Westerners and beheading on TV. They're showing that stuff, and it's all over the place. But I don't watch that stuff. So I'm like, I'm going. And I write an email. And because I love words, I write this fucking long email, and I send it to Kat and Michael. And Kat writes back one sentence. I sort of gather by the email you want to come to Iraq and Palestine and Israel. And I say, yes. And then she said, let me speak to Michael. And the next day, and in those days, we didn't have mobile phone. Oh, did we have a mobile then? When we first were touring, we didn't have mobiles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was mobiles then. She rings me and she says, Michael said you can come, but he wants you to seriously think about it because you're a mother and you have 2 children. Mm. And I said, what a fucking hypocrite. He's a father and he has 2 sons. What's the difference?
Yeah.
And she said, he just said he wants you to consider that. And so at that point, my youngest son, Sol, was in America with his dad, living in the Bronx, he was doing an exchange for 3 months in the ghetto, and he'd gone from a Steiner school to a school where they check you for guns.
Right.
And I rang him and I said, Sol, I need to talk to you because we're very close. And my oldest son I adopted out, so it's a different kind of relationship. I don't ask his permission. Mm-hmm. I said to Sol, I've got the opportunity to go to Iraq, but like in all truth, it's the middle of the war and I might not come back and I need your permission. And he sat. He was only 14 or 15. And he said, Mum, I might not come back. People die on the basketball court every day where I live. He said, kids get shot on my street every day. He said, I might not come back and you gave me permission to go. So, and he said, and I don't believe that's your destiny. And I went, okay. So I went and I flew from Melbourne to Dubai. And when I arrived and looked out the window and saw fucking horses and people in there, the Arabs riding around on camels, I was like, whoa, because you fly in and it's all white. And I just, I'd grown up in New Zealand. I'd seen a lot of the world, but this is a different kind of lens that you're looking at the world in. Mm-hmm. And everybody, all the women are in burqas. And I, at that point, had a computer, but no camera. And I walked into a camera shop in Dubai and I said, I need a good camera because obviously I'm going to be seeing these extraordinary things. I need a camera. And he points to this camera and I don't know how much money it is because nothing's in English. And I just sort of look, and the lens on the camera does a 90-degree turn. And I think, oh, that'll be good for when I'm in really dangerous places. It had a screen to look at. So I could look down and I could point a lens and shoot without anybody knowing what I was using. I was like, I'll just get that. Well, it ended up being like $2,000 fucking dollars.
Wow.
I didn't know. I just paid for it. But I had saved all this money for a house, which I ended up spending traveling on this experience. Not all of it, but a lot. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I flew from there into Jordan and I would not be meeting my party and crew until the next day at 7 a.m. People were flying in from all over the world. But when I arrived in Jordan, there was the military M16s. People don't come from Australia in the middle of a fucking war to go into the Middle East. So it's like I was just like, whoa, I got off the plane and there's guns pointed at me. I'm just this little girl from Australia. I was like, maybe I should have read the newspaper.
With a really expensive camera.
With a really expensive camera. And there's a man at the airport with my name, and he throws me in the car and he starts driving really fast. And my first experience is he pulls over and tells me I have to give him more money. And I say, I don't have any here, but when I get to the hotel, because fuck it, I grew up in Bluff.
Yeah.
My first Instagram name was Tuffy from Bluffy.
Yeah.
So if you try and fuck with me, it's like, I'm not that dumb. So I say, oh yeah, I have money at the hotel. My friend is there. I give to you, but I have none here right now. You take American dollars? And he goes, yeah. And I get all the way to the hotel, and then I look at him and I say, Inshallah is watching you. I'm giving you not one fucking cent because this has already been paid for by my organization. But I was so freaked out. I was looking around. No, women were not on the street, only men. And if you did see women, it was very rare. They were together in twos. Everybody was in the burqa, and I was respectfully covered, but obviously not from the Middle East. And I'm dark skinned. Mm-hmm. And I walked, and actually this is another really spiritual experience. I walked into my hotel and I thought, I'm fucking going to bed because I'm scared. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, where did I think I was going?
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to Iraq in the middle of a fucking war. And I'm just like freaking out. And no one's there. Michael's not there. Everybody arrives in the middle of the night. I just get in the fucking bed and they ring me and say, dinner is ready. I was like, I'm not hungry. I put the pillow and the covers over my head and I go to sleep, and I woke up at 3 a.m. to, the Muslims do the beautiful, in the, what's it called? Call to prayer. Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. And I start hearing it, and I wrap myself in a blanket, and I still am really freaked out. I wrap myself in a blanket and I sit down in the middle of the floor, and I'm sort of rocking like a child. And I just think, actually, breathe. And I close my eyes, and when I close my eyes, my nana was there, a moko, and there was like about 10 women around me, and they had their hands out, and they were literally holding me around me. And I've never done this because you're not allowed to karanga unless you're given that privilege by an elder on the marae. And a karanga is a call of truth. Have you ever been on a marae? No. It's the woman, and she calls. It's like it's haunting. She wails, and the wail is, it says, you come into my space in truth, and if you don't, I'll kill you. Mm-hmm. It's a welcoming, but it's a really fierce welcoming. It's like, you must enter this threshold of our sacred space in truth. Mm-hmm. And I sat down, and when I saw my grandparents, my grandmother, and all of these women around me, I wrapped myself in this wrap and I started to karanga. I woke the whole fucking hotel. Everybody that had arrived in the middle of the night were like, what the fuck is that? Michael was like, Tina must be here, because he knew. Michael had been to New Zealand and saw a cat, and they'd been on a marae, and they knew that was the call of the woman, and it was the welcome. But it's not just a welcome, it's something else. And it just came out of me, and I was crying, and at the same time, call to prayer was happening. And I was just weeping, and when I stopped weeping, the fear was gone, and I was like, I'm here. And then I lay down on my back and listened to call to prayer, and I was like, I'm fucking here, and I'm going to war tomorrow.
Wow.
Okay.
That's intense.
So that was working. That was good, but that was nothing compared to, then getting on the plane, taking a military landing from 15,000 feet above Iraq, where the jet does a nosedive and goes around itself to avoid missile to air.
Yeah, I saw you post about that on Instagram the other day.
Yeah, that was my entry into Iraq. Yeah. And then you would have thought, traveling through the Middle East, the worst. I would have thought, you know, getting into a war zone would have been really intense. They just fucking stamped our passport. There was nothing. It wasn't even a question. It was just, you know, and I was like, why are they just stamping our passport? There was 13 of us, 12 of us, by the way. And Michael looks and he goes, think about it, Tina. Who the fuck will come to Iraq in the middle of the war? They don't care. They don't care if we live or die. They're just like, and they were like so happy. You know, they were so happy. And at the airport, we learned our first word, which was Habibi, my friend. They would say, Habibi. So that was interesting. And I think...
Right. And obviously you made it out.
Yeah, from Iraq, spending time there and then traveling into Israel and meeting with the Israeli army, meeting with young kids and taking music to them. And then from there into Gaza, which was more intense and where I experienced friendly fire.
Did you come under fire in Iraq as well?
Oh yeah, 2 minutes out of the airport, a car bombing right across the road on the freeway blew up, and we saw it, and all the traffic stopped. And if we had have been like maybe 2 minutes in front, we would have been right in the middle of it. And it was on the other side of the freeway, but it was debris. People were, you know, our bus driver. We had two ex-military Iraq soldiers that I didn't realize were all packing guns in their cars. We had like curtains on the cars so no one could see that we were foreigners, because it was pretty intense. So yeah, I experienced the car bombing, and then a bombing in the green zone where I was just heading up to the military headquarters, because the lawyer that was traveling with us, his name was Thomas. He had been a captain in the first warfare against Iraq in 1991 on January the 16th, which was amazing because Sol, my son, was born on January the 16th, 1991, the day they went to war. And he was the captain of tank warfare in Iraq then. What happened is he'd gone back to New York, gone to a Santana concert, Jimmy Garcia, and they're all total anti-war, took acid and saw the light, then took his whole platoon. He took everybody took them all to a concert and got them all high because he wanted them to see the truth as well. He left the military. He would have been kicked out, but his family was a very powerful, wealthy Italian family, and they'd all been generals. So he got released without having to do time because he was a war criminal. He pretty much realized, he woke up and just said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to now fight the government for sending children to war. So yeah, I did come home, and yes, I did get the worst experience was actually being stuck in the middle of they call it friendly fire because they're shooting rubber bullets, and I was in Israel in a town. Oh, I think we've gone. Maybe we get back in. You there? Yeah. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I experienced fire several times.
I am here. Crazy. That's crazy.
But, you know, at the time, it all just felt like that was happening. And I guess because we were there for a much bigger reason, and that was to give hope and to actually, and in truth, was to show the world what was really happening there and not what we were experiencing in the media, because it was very different. They were all seen as terrorists, or, you know, it just wasn't.
You need to take that same crew into Melbourne right now.
Yeah, no shit.
And expose what's really going on there.
Well, I think that Melbourne's just one pawn in a greater part of this big picture, and it's happening somewhere else. I mean,
yeah,
Daniels is just a puppet, really.
Yeah.
There's other stuff that's going on. I don't think you would find the root of this.
Yeah.
This.
How did you get friendly fired? What happened there?
We were in a town So we're in a town in Israel, which, I mean, it's a very grey area there, and I have to be very careful because it's complicated. So it was a town where you're not allowed to drive in the same car if you're a Palestinian as an Israeli. And we were meeting church people that were taking us to show us how full on it really was there. And so all of the Palestinians, so we were in a Palestinian area where they do the blowing the glass and a lot of the stuff they make for Israel. And Israel would call it Israel and Palestine would call it Palestinian. So I'm just going to say I was in an area that was a bit grey. And I'm in this town and we're walking and it's all garage doors rolled up, and it's actually what's called a market day, and Michael's playing guitar. Everybody in the Middle East knew who we were before we got there, because there was a famous musician walking around bare feet singing songs to soldiers, to children. We were going to orphanages. We were living and staying in refugee camps. And this one particular day we met with these people at the church, and they were going to show us this fair. And they said, often the soldiers will roll in, have a little incursion and shoot. Now they most likely will shoot rubber bullets because you guys are in town. But just so you know, rubber bullets kill children if they hit them in the right way. And this market was full of little children. And it was a day that what they call as a curfew. So you're not allowed, if they call a curfew, the kids have to be off the street, or they roll in and they just open fire. And we were in the marketplace and they called a curfew. All the sirens went off and you started to see military presence. And then you see M16s and then running through the streets. Anybody that was Palestinian would have been arrested. They all just disappear and all the fucking roller doors go down and all of a sudden there's no market. And we've been told if there's anything happens, we have to meet behind this church. But we'd all sort of gone off in I was trying to spend as much money as I could because I wanted to support the Palestinians that were obviously not able to make an income because they were in the middle of an intifada, Mm-hmm. It was pretty hot spot at that point. There was a lot going on. So the military, and they're just running past us. It's like, they don't care about us. They're running around us. They know we're there. They're pretending we don't exist, but they're just shooting bullets in the street. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of soldiers come in and they just start shooting, and I hit the ground. And Michael runs. I was always with him because my camera proved to take amazing photos, and every night on Channel 31 in America, it was a public TV station. They were taking my photos and downloading them. So I rolled under this fucking door because the bullets were being shot and kids were running, and they're so good at it. They just disappear. All of a sudden there's no one. And the lady said they're all on the rooftops. That's how they get around. The Palestinians get around on the rooftops. And the military are all on the ground. So I roll under, there's bullets being shot, the camera hits the ground, and and there's a little man in there smoking a hookah pipe with no teeth, and he's got all these beautiful rugs. And I go, oh wow, look, straight away, I'm by myself, and I go, oh, beautiful. And I look at him and I go, how much? I think I did it because I was in a bit of shock, but I also knew supporting these people was really important. We'd been told to spend as much money as we could within this area because it would help feed villages and villages. Mm-hmm. So here I am, there's shooting going on outside. Everybody's gone to the church. Everyone's going, where's Tina? And I've rolled under a garage door with my camera, and I meet this man, right, and I give him $50 and say, can I have this rug? And he smiles and he kisses my face and he offers me the pipe to have a hit. And I was like, maybe not right now. And I wait, it gets quiet. I roll out from under the door and there's no one there but a few military people walking around on the other side. And I start to walk towards the church where I'd been told to meet everybody. And I arrive and everybody's there. And Mike was like, where the fuck were you? And I've got this big rug on my arm. And I'm like, well, when we were being shot at around, I rolled under the door. I met this man and I bought this rug. And I said, I just didn't want to come out until the friendly fire was done. And he was like, what do you fucking like? Shopping in the Middle East while we're in the middle of war. And I said, well, I just feel much better. But I actually was fortunate enough to get a lot of that on camera, and a lot of that was in the film, I Know I'm Not Alone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was it. That changed my life. And in actual fact, I think I did an interview when I was in Europe for one of the European, it was like a Belgian Vogue. And they asked me, because I was one of the women that went on that, they asked me to interview me, and they said to me, what solution do you have? And I said, oh, it's very complicated. I don't have a solution, but one of the mantras that I've lived by ever since I experienced that was no human has the right to take another human being's life without their permission. And that's my solution to how I live in this society where there's a lot of complication. But in truth, if we all lived by that, you know, we wouldn't take anybody's life, really. There'd be very little. And that was the only thing that I could come up with that felt right, having been there and seen everybody's perspective. And I respect, you know, everybody's experience is so different because it depends on how you were born and what the fabric of your life is. So it was life-changing for me in the fact that I don't think I would ever look at any side just believing there's one answer or one way, you know. I think it's an intricate human experience we're having, and especially if we find myself growing up in war-torn countries. And it was there that I felt so fucking privileged to be growing up in Western society where that was not an experience I had ever had until, you know, more recently, sort of like that. And I have been in when the riots happened in Los Angeles. I was there for that, and I did experience curfews and military shutdowns. But I mean, it was like there was riots and it was rife, and it was the only time I really felt safe having a black husband, because if you were coloured, it was the only time, you know, it was in the riots that was like it was safe to be coloured at that point in time. After Rodney King riots, that's where I was living. That's why I moved back to Australia. I didn't want my son to grow up in that environment, you know.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother podcast, you know, going into where that's gone.
My life is a fucking podcast.
But I'm talking about more like America, you know, like how since you left and where it's evolved to now, where they're at now. You know, obviously, I don't know what you think about where America's at now, having lived there, particularly LA.
Well, when I went back to LA not that long ago, it felt very gentrified. I grew up in Venice Beach, where I grew up with the Crips on one side, and the V13s were my housemates. So, which I didn't even realize. I just thought it was a tattoo, and it was a part of all Mexicans had V13. You know, he was a skater and he skated for Dogtown, but like it's a different kind of war now. It's corporate wars. They've pretty much removed and pushed all of those people. You know, the people of color and that, they're just pretty much jamming them into certain areas. And now you have who I call, I don't even call him by his name. I call him 45 because he's the 45th president of the United States of America. And one of the reasons I don't talk about him is he's a narcissist. And a lot of people believe he's our savior for what's happening here. But I would probably say that they've all got something to do with it in one way or another. And that who we think is good and who we think is bad is just, we're only seeing this much. And there's so many veils.
It's a stage show.
Huh?
It's a stage show. We get to see the stage show.
Yeah, we see. And so I think if you practice, and if you are practicing spirituality, whenever there is something, it's like I just close my eyes and I listen and I just feel into, that doesn't feel right. And that's the only thing that's guiding me at the moment. But I listened to a reading by Martin Luther King's daughter, and she said, don't feed him by talking about his name. Don't even talk about Gates, or don't feed into that, but attack the policies. Attack the policies that are removing our idea of freedom and what is truth. She goes, start getting into the policies, and whoever is actually creating those policies, attack the party. Because she said, if you feed into 45, she said, it's just going to, she said, he loves it. It doesn't matter if it's good publicity or bad publicity. He's like, I mean, it reminds me of Hitler. There's been nothing like it since. And the fact that we're building, in this day and age, building more walls, they never worked. They've never worked. They didn't work in Palestine. They haven't worked in Iraq. They didn't work in Germany. They don't work. Separation doesn't heal anything. So what do I think? I think humans are imploding on themselves because they're so greedy. And that this isn't even about politics. This is something that's beyond that. It's like, I mean, I've been watching Terminator and Hunger Games. I love that shit, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When I watched that stuff in the 80s, I was like, this is indoctrination. And people would go, what are you talking about? And I was like, this is indoctrination, where we see this stuff so that when it actually happens, it's become normalized. And computer technology, I mean, do you know what Siri did the other day? I said, for fuck's sake, Siri, how many times do I have to ask you? Cool child 2 of mine. And you know what she said? I don't. It was like she was basically telling me, I'm not responding to you because you're angry and you're swearing at me. Like, but she never fucking listens. Like, and I go like this, oh my God. Computer technology is one of our, I think when you see films like that, and now here we are being literally, look at us, everything's on computers and
even the decisions being made, like where you are right now, they're being made by a government on a computer program. The computer says this is what we've got to do, and they're treating us like an algorithm, like a social media algorithm. Yeah. And yeah.
Do you know, I married I would say, you know, I won't give his bloodlines. He's Mexican, American Indian, African, black. He calls himself black. And when I married him, he woke me up to a lot of what conspiracy was and UFO stuff that the government was hiding. And now all of a sudden they're showing fucking pictures of UFOs. But back then you were a conspiracy theorist if you believed in it. And I mean, even just looking at Julian Assange's case that's happening at the moment, and that he uncovered war crime that was heinous. None of those people have been brought to justice, and he's looking at 120 years in jail. All he did was tell the truth. And so what do I think right now? I feel like we have been prepped and preened and that these people that, you know, when you see all this stuff online and people are like, well, he has to do that. And it's like, oh my God, no, he doesn't. Not enough people are really, truly, there's not enough people. I don't believe that the impact is about, if you put scales right now of the way we're being treated by our government and by the policies and then what's actually happening all around the world, it just doesn't fucking feel quite right. It's almost like, but it's so minimal what's really happening in the big picture of, you know, nobody cared about all the lives that were killed in the wars. Why do we, you know, I do want to protect our elderly, and I do want to make sure the vulnerable are safe. I'm vulnerable. My partner is asthmatic and diabetic. He's vulnerable. My son has lung scars from pneumonia. He's vulnerable. I do want to protect us by being healthy and taking care of myself. But you know what? If it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And I'm okay with that. And anybody else that needs, it's their time.
It seems that the thing is they're presenting us with you have your freedom or you have your safety, and you can't have both kind of option, which isn't.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about that, because at the very beginning of this, I started contacting lawyers and asking them, how do I legally get out of having the vaccine? And every one of those lawyers said to me, they cannot mandate a vaccine. But now you're hearing our own Prime Minister say, you know, Queensland University we have is it the genome? They have the blueprint for the actual vaccine and they're working on it. But the Queensland University is owned by China. So, and they're saying that the 5 countries have come together and given their blueprints of the vaccine. So they're working together. And I said to my friend, I'm not fucking taking that vaccine. And if you've ever seen Mad Max, I used to say, if the world goes to shit, I'm going to be Tina Turner in Mad Max.
Right.
No shit, when all this went down, I started going, maybe I should start doing combat training. And then my son goes, that's not very yogic. And I said, oh, tell that to Arjuna.
Right?
Right?
Absolutely. Yep. Best archer of all time. Yeah.
Yep. Because he didn't want to do it either. He was like, I can't do that. And Krishna said, this is your dharma. And what, you know, like, so even though I said the solution to these wars that we have are no human being deserves the right to take another human being's life without their permission. What do you do when your own child is at risk? Or when you know, I mean, I would never fight for me. That's just not why I would ever fight. But I am a warrior and I would fight for humanity. And I definitely will fight for freedom.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, and that's that's exactly right. We've been tricked. We're being tricked into believing that it's one or the other, and it's not true. And it's brainwashing. It's conditioning. Like, you know, you got to give up your safety to your freedom to be safe. And if it's not like that.
I think one of the biggest things you'll hear, and this is happening a lot, if you have an alternative perspective, then you're a conspiracy theorist. And now I'm very careful about the information that I actually choose to absorb, because 1, it enters my energetic hemisphere, and 2, I think there is a lot of information out there that's fear-mongering. And to be honest, I don't even need to read any of that stuff to know that if there is a vaccine, they will eventually have to have a tracer in it to track that you've got the vaccine in your body. And they're already saying, if you don't have the vaccine, you won't be allowed to travel, you won't be allowed to be educated in the way that they want you to be educated. And if you look at weird programs like Handmaid's Tale, which I never watched, but I saw maybe a snippet of, where there'll be certain places in the world that are going to be harder than others. And so, I mean, it would be like if you were in West or East Germany and you got the hell out and then you realized you should have gotten out. And I'm kind of feeling like that at the moment in the world, that there will be, because I don't believe this is stopping anytime soon. And if they're talking about mandating a vaccine, then I think the world as we knew it, 2019, is never going to be the same.
Yeah.
So what do I fucking think about that? Probably time to start combat training with your bare hands and learning how to use bow and arrows.
Yeah, right. and becoming everyone becomes legal experts so we can defend ourselves.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm so fortunate that I'm a hairdresser, and I've had my salon for 28 years, and my clients are very powerful, wealthy people, and a lot of them are lawyers, and so I have a lot of support. But I would say if things get worse, it will end up being like there's only going to be two sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you're privileged with money that will buy you a place on the side where you will have more freedom, but it is definitely starting to feel like the Hunger Games. And then what's his name? Snow. I always think Snow is 45.
Snow.
Have you never seen the Hunger Games?
No, I haven't.
Well, this is pretty much what it feels like what's happening now. And there's a district in the Hunger Games called the 9th District where everybody is under military lockdown. And I was like, fuck, we're in the 9th District of the Hunger Games.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And so I'm glad I grew up fishing and on a farm and knowing how to live from bush. The one thing that I've been thinking about doing is studying native bush in Australia, so I know more about what's poisonous and what isn't. Like, seriously. And how weird is that? That now I'm starting to think about how would I survive if the world changes?
Yes. That's crazy, but it's reality as well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too that you say like talk about 45, that you don't want to talk about 45. But
no, I don't want to talk about him. I want to talk about the policies that he has and his party, but I just don't want to give his name because it's just, I don't want it to be anything.
Yeah, that's fine too. But and I don't know either way, but I also don't agree with the other side's policies either. And so
no, me either.
Yeah. No. And so it's so difficult.
I don't know who that party is. I don't even know who they are because
we're only having a conversation about this much of the spectrum, and we're leaving out all of the humanity and all of the good things about what we are, and we're talking about these two little parties pulling power, and we're.
No, but it's so much more than that, isn't it?
Well, it should be, but it's not, because that's the political conversation that we're allowed to have. You know, and anything outside of that spectrum of conversation is conspiracy, even though it's still moving ahead either way, you know.
But that's sort of like if I am curious and I want to question things, and if I even question something or raise it, you will often hear that's conspiracy. And I actually take it upon myself to listen to people that have had the experiences. I try not to just listen to theories. I do want to hear podcasts from people that have literally experienced this stuff themselves and they have something to say about it, or university lecturers that, you know, they haven't been outlawed or called conspiracists, but they have really great theories and they have the information to sort of sustain that theory. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm listening to. And I've got my girlfriend constantly sending me fucking, she's way down the rabbit hole, and I get it. And she loves 45 because if you are way down that rabbit hole, he's believed to be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
But I just go, nah, they're all pawns. There's something even greater. It's a bigger power that's doing this, and you know, it's exorbitant wealth, and it's actually feels like they want to control the mass population, and they also want to get rid of a certain number. Like there's too many here, so they want to, because if there's a lot, then and there was a rising up, they would have to, you know. So I don't know, like you can any given day it can change.
It does. Yes, exactly. You got to be a little.
Depends on what I listened to this morning. I listened to a podcast this morning by a South African guy who grew up, and at 23 he went to London and he became a member of the ANC, but only because he didn't even know that apartheid was wrong, because he grew up in segregation. And then when he went to London, and everyone was like, so how do you feel about that? And have you seen this? And have you seen that? And they censor everything. In apartheid, everything was censored. And I listened to this podcast and I was like, fuck, not much has changed. And yet they thought the world changed when Nelson Mandela got out. And look at us now, we're still all being shepherded and segregated in different ways. Now it's sometimes color, and it's sometimes class, and then it's sometimes thought. It's just like, you know, there's constant things that are dividing everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And it feels like we're moving towards a technological prison, really. You know, like more cameras, more surveillance, more tracking.
Well, do you know, I had a dream the other night. It was fucked, actually. I woke up freaking out and sweating that all the police banged on my door, and they came in. There was 4 of them, and I opened the door and they came in, and that it was so vivid. They were like literally standing over the top of me, and I was like, what's this about? Can I call my lawyer? And they said, so have you left the 5 kilometer radius? And I was like, beg your pardon? Like, so don't answer the question, Tina, just ask it. Sorry, I don't quite understand. What was the question again? What do you mean, have I left the 5 kilometer radius? I've never been pulled up outside the 5 kilometer radius. Why? And they said, because 5 days ago, your car was on camera, your license plate was on. This was a dream, was on license plate. And I was like, I said, oh, yes, no, yes, yes. Oh, my gosh. I said, I didn't even think about that. My son lives there, and he is, I'm a carer for him because he has scarification on his lungs. And I take him food, and he actually lives at my address, but he stays with his girlfriend. So I pick him up so that he doesn't have to ride on public transport, to be mindful of Corona, because we can't have him bringing it home because I'm also compromised. But that was my dream, and I woke up and I was like, oh my God, get your story straight. And the worst thing was, here I feel fucking guilty, because that's what I do. I pick up my son and bring him home, and actually we are compromised. But I don't care. You know, I would go out in the world and touch whatever, but it's that I am actually scared. There is a fear mechanism in me. When I'm driving, I get between 2 cars. I make sure I'm on the right side of the lane, not the left where the police cars would be pulling you over. I literally am already traveling in a way like I'm in this division. Like I've already learned how to move in the world where I'm not seeing, but everything now what I realize is like, well, everything's going to be tracked on camera, and they're just going to pick up your license plate if you're out of your zone.
Yeah, and you won't even get a visit from the police. You just get a ticket in the mail.
Oh shit!
That's where it's going to go. That it's just going to be automatically printed out, tickets in the mail.
It's just so much. It's just too.
It's not human.
No. And what they would do, the woman that they, you know, I saw the thing about the woman that was pregnant, and the 21-year-old girl that was being strangled by the police officer, and they're telling her not to hit while he's got his hand around her throat. I mean, I've never had good experiences with the police. I know some nice policemen, but myself personally, I never have. And so to think that they are going to have power Can you imagine all the fucking people joining the police force now that are angry, that are like militant? Can you imagine? They're just going to have this influx of people that don't feel very good about themselves, that are going to need to have a position of power. So it's a bit scary, really.
Yeah. Right. And that's, you know, that's the whole reason why you have the legislation there, the one that they voted to overthrow to extend for 6 months, is that you want to have checks and balances so you don't get a police state that people get too much power and it goes to their head and it gets out of control.
Yeah. Well, we have to, we do. We have to be involved. We need to sign as much as our signature is actually quite powerful, and people don't realize that. And I think that I talk about it and try to mobilize as much of the community as I can and send out a lot of stuff for petitioning, because that actually, the more people that speak, that sign out, we vote these people in. They do work for us. So we have to at least let them know that there is a resistance to what it is that they're trying to do. Because I definitely do not want the privilege of being able to travel and being able to move around. And I want to be able to see my family. You know, I'm isolated. I have a son in New Zealand. I can't see him at all. And let's talk about Jacinda Ardern, who locked down the whole city of Auckland for 3 cases. Like, she signed the Belts and Roads contract too. Yes. Not only that, I saw some footage of her 20 years ago with Bill Gates, and apparently she is linked to owning a vaccine company with him. Right. I remember seeing it and I was like, bullshit. It was just in it, because obviously if you start following stuff, it's a bit scary who's involved, isn't it? Yeah. Crazy. And everybody loves her, and I loved her. I was like, I loved her when everything happened with when she wore the burqa, and the way she has handled a lot of the policies in New Zealand. She's actually really loved, but there are people out there talking about the fact that that's all been strategic, because now she's like worse than Andrews, actually. Yeah. So the way she's handling it. Yeah. So what do you reckon we need to do? Get more like yoga teachers into politics, or? Fuck, man. I don't know if that would work, because a lot of people won't touch it, and you know, I get in a lot of trouble. I've always gotten in a lot of trouble, and I never left. You know, I always taught in the same studios for many years, but I would always have, you know, emails every now and then that, Tina, you know, people are complaining because you swear and because of some of the things you say in class. So I don't know how many people. That's also the reason why the rest of your class loves you, though. Yeah, because I'm fucking real. That's right, exactly. And the whole thing is that, and that you know, one of my teachers, Les, who's amazing, he said to me, Tina, you don't have to teach a class and swear. And I was like, own the fuck, man. Own the fuck. And I said, why is that? Like I said, I don't do it in a violent way, and I certainly don't ever do it in a hurtful way, because it's intention, right? But I don't know. I think we have to talk about it and speak up. And I try and share my perspective through storytelling to get people to maybe look at it from a different perspective, rather than telling them what I think. Yeah. Which is something that I've learned, because if anybody tells me, I'm just like, fuck off. You know, I don't want to be told anything. So I definitely have been, and for me in the wellness community at the moment, you know, I've been speaking out a lot about that with Black Lives Matter and what's happened. For me, that's all a part of this. That's another part of the jigsaw puzzle, because there is a segregation and there is an oppression. And when a marginalized community is oppressed, that's just that, you know, that what's happening now is just another layer of who's going to be the marginalized community. And that the powers that be I mean, if we look back since the 20s, since prohibition, have we really ever had any control
Mm-hmm.
over what's happening? Like, it's just everywhere I look in history, politics is corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always been other agendas. And when they mix politics and religion, well, fuck, the most heinous stuff was done, especially to women in religion and politics. Any female that was empowered was normally burnt at the stake or beheaded. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really, we've done this to ourselves. Technology hasn't done it. It will be what maybe changes the nature of the way that we are in the world, but we as humans, I think, have to look inside and really go, when we make a decisions, what is driving that decision? And is that decision about me?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it about the greater good? And I really think sharing it as much as you can in the form of bringing those stories to, a lot of people can't hear certain things. They're not ready to hear this. And sadly, they may not understand it until it's too late. And then they find themselves in this life that is not their pretty life that they were used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so this lockdown feels like it's sort of draining everybody financially, so that we're even more unstable,
Mm-hmm.
and that we have less support systems in place, because that's really what these are doing. Like, it's literally destroying
the fabric of society.
Yeah. And that is, I totally believe that it's unnecessary, and that we can't just sleep on it, but we also can't go out with guns blazing, because there's a way that it needs to be addressed. And I don't have the answers. I just know that every day that I wake up, I think, what can I do to be a better human being in my world and in my life? And then, just before I was on the phone to you, I just got a text from my girlfriend. We're all moving to Airlie Beach because no one wears masks up there. And look at this land. It's $300,000 and it's on the hill. So if the water rises, and it's actually, we can just get in boats and leave if shit goes down. And this is like a woman who's got a business up in Queensland. She's like, I'm fucking getting out and I'm buying on that water, and we'll fish and we'll eat coconuts and we'll build boats. So if shit goes bad, we'll just move. And I was like, fucking hell, man. The world has come to this, where we're all planning strategies and escape. But I go, where the fuck are you going to escape to? Because the whole world's in this.
Yeah.
The islands, there will be islands that they don't know about, that we'll be able to, like, oh God, you might need to take a Maori with you on one of those boats.
This is such a huge conversation, and it's a shame that we have to have it on Zoom, because I feel like face to face we could go deeper, and because there's lots of stuff where I want to interject and ask more questions, but the connection doesn't allow for that. And so, and there's all different, there's so many different perspectives and things that I don't think we have different perspectives on a couple of different views just by what you're saying. It doesn't negate either one of those though. And I feel like right now, everyone's being pulled into mask versus no mask, and, blue versus red or black versus white. And it just, doesn't lend itself to any, it's serving to break down society in the same way that draining all the money is, and so.
But those oppressive kind of values that our communities are built on is what separates. So, and when we look at where that's come from, it's so far up the chain that,
Yeah. But I'm just sort of saying, like, even the mask thing, which is just a recent evolution. It's not, it's not a systemic thing that goes back for decades. It's something that we just started, and
Yeah.
how quickly it becomes something that's so divisive, you know.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I've asked a doctor if I can come and make an appointment so I don't have to wear one, because I can wear it. I'll wear it if I have to at work, if someone needs me to, in the salon, like, that's fine. Like, if someone feels unsafe, you know, but I do not fucking want to wear a mask out in public. Outside, it just feels wrong. Like, I understand for the safety of vulnerable people sometimes. I get that, because germs pass, and China have been doing it for a really long time. But to be told I have to fucking wear a mask while I'm walking down the beach and out in nature and outside walking my dogs, it just feels innately wrong to me. And so, yeah, I don't want to wear a mask. Why?
Yeah. Like, when you're not sick.
No.
Yeah.
No. And and I'm vulnerable. Like, I have a kidney disease, and it clearly states if you have kidney disease and any dysfunction, it's a very dangerous disease for you. And it's like, well, okay, then that's my time. But no, I'm actually trying to find legal ways of not having to wear a mask. The only problem that you have is then people get angry at you and be like, well, you don't fucking know why I'm not wearing a mask. It's none of your business.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm kind of saying, is like how quickly we adapt to these polarizing as a society, you know, like how quickly the media suggests it to us and we just pick it up and we run with it, you know. It just sort of shows how this kind of division is a theme in the control process. And
it's not just physically,
you know.
It's not just physically destabilizing or monetarily value, it's the mental destabilization that's happening, because, you know, the connection, like, I've gone down some pretty black holes because I haven't been able to touch anyone. It's been almost 6 months. I mean, apart from me working when I've worked, because I was allowed to work sometimes, but like you know, people don't touch anymore, and it's so amazing. You know, those people, you see them and they're like, hi, and they give you a big hug and you're like, oh, a normal person, right? And, you know, a normal person. And yet most people are just like, well, I don't know whether I should hug you or I shouldn't hug you, because we've already experienced so far, you know, we're already living in the rules. Like, oh, maybe we shouldn't. Or I like hug, I touch, I hug.
Yeah.
Because I would rather die than lose the sense of connection. And I think that that's probably the biggest crime that's been committed right now, is the destabilization of our mental well-being because of the disconnection that humans are feeling from one another and society. And it's just, for me, probably the greatest devastation that's happening, is that whole sense of feeling like you're a part of a community, and it's just being taken away from us.
Yeah, exactly, that's exactly what it is. And I feel that when you say that, I feel that in the heart, like that's a foundational part of our humanity, is connection, and that basically legislated against humanity by saying you can't touch each other.
Yeah, and in that, it's harder to get a sense of what is right and wrong when you are not connected to your community, because you're isolated in all of these thoughts. And a part of that, I mean, that feels like bigger than most of what's going on, like the not work, the not anything, that part of people are doubting themselves. People are unsure if they're left or right now. People switch from day to day, you know, and even like, for instance, my relationship, I was seeing a guy for almost a year. He's so fucking scared. I hadn't seen him for 6 months. And then I just cut him. I was just like, dude, I just need to have someone that will show up and not live in fear. And then now he's just worked it out. He's just woken up and gone, oh, fuck, I've been a dick. This whole Corona thing, I don't think I handled it very well. And it's like, no. And he's not right at all or left. Like we're very different. But he's a smart man. He's just worked, and it didn't matter what I said to him. I was like, it's all, a lot of this is a bit much. No, we have to do the right thing. Like, he hasn't seen anybody or touched anyone for 6 months, and now he's going crazy and going, oh, now I get what you're talking about. And it's like, oh, now you've lost your shit.
Yeah.
Now you're fucking awake. Like, or you had to totally lose everything, like me, to wake up. And then I thought, if we're in a war, he just would not be the right person to be. I don't know.
You're like calculating. I need someone who can self-defend, who can hunt, who can cut a kangaroo up into pieces for me.
He does 5 languages and did go to the army in Albania though, so actually he probably would be quite a good fighter and be able to defend me. I just have to know he was on my side.
Yeah. Wow, this conversation is amazing, and I feel like I could talk to you about all the things forever. But we'll get to an end point, and I like to ask my question at the end is, what's your favorite spiritual wisdom or quote?
This shall pass.
You say you'll pass?
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. Beautiful. There we go. So we didn't even speak about the fact that you teach yoga.
I just did. I just talked for an hour on a Zoom conversation.
True.
I teach asana. Yes, I teach asana.
Asana, yeah. So I want to ask a lot of other questions, but so when did you become a yoga teacher? When did that happen?
When I was diagnosed with my kidney disease, and I thought, fuck, if I die, what are some of the things that I've wanted to do with my life that I haven't done? And in the back of my heart, I'd always wanted to do my teacher training, but I said, when I can do a handstand, well, fuck, I wouldn't be a teacher today. I still can't hold one by itself. When I can do a handstand, I'll become a teacher. And I went to Bali, and I was with Octavio, who owns the practice. He's a really beautiful man, and we were out having dinner. And I was with Natalie Imbruglia and Octavio, and we'd been at a class together, and we were hanging out. And they said, when are you going to do your teacher training? And I said, I'm not ready. I can't do a handstand. He just looked at me and he said, oh, for fuck's sake, Tina, just do the yoga teacher training, and I'm sure the handstand will come eventually. And just for the record, he goes, I'm like level 3 Ashtanga. Doesn't make me a good teacher. That's not it. He goes, you don't need to do a fucking handstand to teach a handstand, which I realized is true. And actually the handstand was something that I stopped really seeking because the yoga became something else. So 7 years ago, I became a teacher, and that transformed my life, really, because if you stand in front of a room and you're teaching truth, then you better fucking embody it, or you're lying. No. Yeah. Or if you're teaching ahimsa, you need to know in your own life where you're violent and where you're causing harm. And so I know when I stand up in front of my students that everything I teach is from my own personal experience and comes from a story that ignites my heart to be more in this world. And that's, I just feel so blessed that I've had the most fucked up life that most children could ever experience, to have come through and use all of those experiences as a privilege, because they gathered gold for me. And when I get to show up in front of people, I know I've lived it and I've experienced it, and I can see it. And I see the students that have suffered child abuse and violence and verbal, there's not much that I haven't ever experienced in life that I don't see on those mats. And so that's my gift, really, and I get to share that. And it's such a privilege to be able to use the fabric of my life to help other people see their way home, because there's nothing that we are not already, you know. And when you asked, are you spiritual? And you're like, we're all born spiritual, but it's true. We are all born with the capacity and the blueprint that takes us to that place of truth and home or heart or loving awareness or whatever God you want to call it, whatever deity it is that you look up to, religion, but there's so many different pathways. So I just feel grateful that this is my pathway. It's really through the fabric of my life that I've learned how to be in the world and learned who I truly am and how magnificent we all are, you know, regardless of what you've done in this world. It doesn't really matter. Even the most darkest, even 45, I'm sure there's something nice in there. You know, like I just try and see that all of these things that we are creating, and even the stuff that I maybe don't agree with, is happening for us to learn more. And I do think that regardless of how scary the world is right now and how much has been taken away from us, maybe that's our greatest lesson. Because what's essentially happening in the world is people are waking up more and seeing that without all of those things, there's a magnificence that we can lean into that will support us. And I think
I feel too that, like you said earlier, that there's frustration and like I think it starts with, and I feel like that going through this process, you can't hear me?
I can now.
You can, yeah. So we start with anger, then it's frustration, and then we move into like powerlessness. And it's only going through the process of moving through the powerlessness that we can get to our power.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, use it as that to, you know, because it would be much easier to just to disconnect and stay in meditation and not pay attention, you know,
right,
to what's happening. But facing it allows you to move through.
You know, Les Leventhal, who's one of my dear friends and an amazing teacher, and he teaches through the yamas and the niyamas, and was a prostitute and a drug addict in the 80s, and an extraordinary yoga teacher, very asana based, but it's through the body that he's healed. He always says, as human beings, never stop someone from hitting rock bottom, because it's down there that you gather the tools to move through to the place of truthfulness. And it's really like, I feel like as a society that maybe this is our rock bottom. There may be a little falling, a little deeper and a little darker, and the pit could get a little more hellish. You know, I'm probably living more consciously than I ever have in my life, even though I'm depressed sometimes. I cry a lot. Fuck, I've cried a lot in the last couple of months. I'm getting teary even thinking about it. I feel more awake in these dark times. And actually, if you say that, I would have to say, you know, I said this too shall pass, but I would say, no, I'll have to null and void that one and say it's the darkest hour right before the dawn rises. So I would say that probably fits my life way more than this too shall pass, because it fucking hasn't passed. It's one thing after another, after another, after another. But what's happened is everything that comes now, I meet it in such a different way, because I know it couldn't. This is where I am. There's nothing to change.
Yeah. Beautiful. Where do we find you? Where do people find you if they want to, get in contact or, go to yoga?
I'm on Instagram at Tina Tainui, which is my Māori name. So you can always find me under Tina Tainui. You can find me on Church of Yoga. Or if you go to jail, you can find me at Peace Inn because I'm also there. Because I teach in the jails. So, yeah.
Right. I should have spoken to you. When I was in Melbourne. I was trying to get into the jails to teach people and they wouldn't let me. So,
let's talk about it because I'm now creating online content for the prisons.
Wow. All right, cool. I'd love to teach meditation. So
yeah, amazing.
Do that. Cool. Yeah. And so do you own the Church of Yoga? What's that?
I mean, fuck, who owns the church? I've started to think, why did I call it church? Because it's church is such a, I don't know, it doesn't have a good feeling for me, but I called it church because the idea of church or religion of any sort is devotion.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I didn't call it church. My students called it church because every Sunday morning at Yoke, I would literally have to turn people away. And it was like people would say, oh, I'm coming and I'm going to church. And I was like, really? They're like, yeah, man, my Sunday is like church. So that's how Church of Yoga got its name. It's just online yoga. It's obviously taken all forms with isolation. And when we first went into isolation, it was huge. People were so scared
mm-hmm.
that it was really good for business. And now it's sort of, and then what happened is people then went, oh, fuck. They pivoted and everybody got online. So now there's a lot more to go around, but I love it. And I'm only teaching 2 classes, but my biggest goal at the moment is to create online content for people in jails because not only, so if we want to know what it's like to feel incarcerated, the people in the prisons are not only in jail, but now they're on 24-hour lockdown in their cells.
Mm-hmm.
And they only get out to eat, to shower, to take their meds, and for any extracurriculum. But there's no extracurriculum at the prisons because you're not allowed to go out there anymore because of this. So I have had some people and we've been making some online stuff and I'm just in the process of getting it into a format that they can play in the prisons. And then I'm going to try and get it all around. So yeah, that's my goal at the moment.
Cool. Beautiful.
Why not? The whole world's going to shit out here.
All right. Let's wrap it up then. Thank you so much for your time and coming and having a chat. And hopefully one day next year we could do it in real life.
Yeah. That'd be amazing. And thank you, Dan. I've been following your journey since you were a tradie.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Speak to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.